We were in the middle of pitching an investor, and he just got up and washed his hands. And, and you want to talk about rude. We found out that he told his partner, who was also in attendance, that he couldn't believe that he was, shaking hands with a black person. Right. So he got up and washed his hands because he didn't want to, I guess he wanted to cleanse himself, if you will.
He did this visibly in front. I mean, in a way
in front of us. It was right in front of us. And we had to maintain our composure and keep pitching.
Today on LawNext, the story of founding, growing, and then stepping away from a legal tech startup from the perspective of a husband and wife team of Black entrepreneurs. My guest today is James Jones Jr., who, together with his wife Christina in 2015, founded Court Buddy, a service that connects consumers with lawyers at affordable prices, and who, late last year, stepped away from the company to pursue his next startup. This is Bob Ambrogi, and you're listening to LawNext, the podcast that features the innovators and entrepreneurs who are driving what's next in law. We'll get to today's interview in just a moment, but first, let's hear from the sponsors who generously support LawNext. And now, on to this week's interview. James Jones Jr., welcome to LawNext.
Thank you so much, Bob. It's always a pleasure to be invited to a podcast like this, and we've known each other for a while now. I think dating back to 2016. So you've pretty much been on this journey with us, from the beginning.
Yeah, well, you were in our first year of the ABA Tech Show Startup Alley, which is still a thing.
That's right.
We're still doing that every year.
I know it's still going strong, right? Still going strong.
In some ways, it gets more attention now. That first year was a little choppy. We had some audio difficulties and other problems that year, but ultimately it turned out okay. But yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. And I was, I realized we have something else in common, which is that that you, like me, were in journalism before you went to law school.
I was, yes. My college degree, as a matter of fact, is in journalism, with a minor in Spanish. And right after college, I worked at a newspaper in North Carolina, which is where I'm from, called the Winston-Salem Journal. And I did that for a year. And, when you start out in journalism, you start covering things like, Little League baseball games and things like that. But I eventually worked my way up to handling some of the court. I was assigned to the courtroom beat at the local courthouse in Winston-Salem. And but that was the beginning of my journey. I was a journalist before I became a lawyer and before I became an entrepreneur, tech entrepreneur.
Yeah. So is that how you started thinking about becoming a lawyer?
It was before that. When I was still in college, I had a couple of professors that encouraged me to pursue a legal career. I was the type of student that would always debate in class. There was an interest I took a couple classes like constitutional law. There was a class called Intro to Logic I took that was all about getting you ready for the LSAT. And so I just started really gravitating toward a career in law. I went to a couple of career fairs, and I spoke with a couple of admissions directors from different law schools across the country. And that's what really started getting the wheels turning. I also interned at a couple of law firms while I was still in college, and really just admired a lot of the effort that went into fighting on behalf of clients and making sure that you're obtaining the best outcome as possible for clients. And so that was sort of the genesis behind me deciding to go to law.
Yeah. So you started Court Buddy in 2015, but what had you been doing before then? I mean, you were practicing law, right, in Florida?
Yes, that's right. So I started practicing law in 2006. What I did was, the audience would know this, but litigation. I represented Fortune 500 companies. I also represented individuals, people that were going through divorce, consumer issues like credit card debt issues, and so, part of that period of my career involved me going to court a lot. I was able to, before I went in front of a judge, talk to a lot of people that weren't represented, and they would say, "Hey, you're a lawyer. Can I ask you a few questions?" And of course, I would answer the questions. They would give me their life story. They would
Right.
they would be going through all sorts of legal issues, divorce, consumer issues, and what I found out was that they were like when they were about to go in front of the judge, it was for something serious, like they were about to get a default judgment entered against them, or just something that would have had some serious ramifications. In terms of their case. And so I would ask them, hey, why didn't you just hire a lawyer? I mean, this is pretty serious stuff. I mean, you go in front of this judge now, and I know this judge, and you're probably not going to win this particular win this motion. You're not going to get an order entered in your favor. And so they would say, well, I don't have, number one, $5,000 for a retainer. I don't have $10,000 for a retainer. Number two, I can't afford $300 to $400 an hour. I make $25 an hour. And so I the next thing they would tell me is, well, you seem really knowledgeable. You know the judge. How about I just pay you $200 to go in front of the judge? And at first, my mentality at the time was, really inside the lawyer box, if you will.
Yeah,
what that means is, I need to know that you need to come to my law firm. I need to
Right.
charge you a retainer. I need to sign you up, send you an engagement letter, and so forth and so on. And so after hearing, several, when I say several, about hundreds of these types of these potential clients coming to me and telling me these things, I said, I wonder if there's something that can be done. And this was just one location. This is South Florida, right?
Yeah.
And so I just started, wondering if there's something else that could be done. And my wife, who ended up being Court Buddy's co-founder with me, I would tell her these stories, and she's like, "This is unbelievable. I mean, how can we live in one of the greatest judicial systems in the world and have to deal with people that can't get access to justice? How do we address that?" And she comes from an art directing, advertising background, marketing background, and we started, putting our heads together. We hired some great developers, and Court Buddy was born. But my career before Court Buddy was in the courtroom, in the trenches, talking to people, fighting those battles on behalf of clients.
But had you ever started a business before? Did you have any background in doing that?
Not like Court Buddy. I've done, in college, I dabbled a little bit in entrepreneurship. I call myself solving a problem of people on campus that couldn't get to a record store. The record store was located in the mall, so they had issues, with transportation. Getting there was about a 30-minute, drive, an hour if you count bus transportation. And so one of the things I did was I worked in a computer lab, and I just, got them the music that they wanted, and they would, pay me for it. And, I had a little, business, if you will. I also did some tutoring when I was in college. And so, but Court Buddy was the real business. And that was the real tech business. And yeah, so that was my, first business, if you will.
Yeah. And is that the same for Christina as well? Does she have any kind of, I mean, you mentioned she was in marketing and advertising. Has she run businesses or operated businesses before?
No. She was her career. Yeah, she was an art director before Court Buddy, and so yeah, this was for all intents and purposes both of our our first jump into business. I will say that I forgot to mention this. I did have my own firm, so I was a solo practitioner for a couple years. But that's on a different level than like Court Buddy and a big tech company, if you will.
Yeah. So just from a startup point of view, I mean, how did you go about doing that? I mean, did you go kind of, leave your law firm cold turkey and go into starting Court Buddy, or did you gradually make that transition?
So we bootstrap Court Buddy, and so because we don't come from wealth, we had to figure out ways to fund the company, if you will, and so what we decided to do was keep our full-time jobs. So I still ran my law firm, and Christina still had her job at ad agency. And Christina, I think she stopped. She left her ad agency 6 months after we started Court Buddy. So this is 2015. We started Court Buddy in January of 2015. It was incorporated in Florida in September 2014. We spent about 3 months building the tech out, hiring the right people, and so in mid of I think it was around June, as a matter of fact, of 2015, Christina left her ad agency, and I continued to practice law until 2016. So about a year into Court Buddy is when we had enough revenue that was being generated for both of us to leave our full-time jobs. And so, but we in the beginning, we just we continued to work full time, and our schedule. We tell people this. Our schedule was essentially, the typical 8 to 5 or 9 to 5. We'd come home, take about an hour to eat and just catch up on the day, and then from 6 till about 2 in the morning, we'd continue to build Court Buddy. So we essentially had two full time jobs rolled into one day.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you have employees at that point? At what point did you start to bring up? Well, I mean, you must have had engineers working for you in some way.
Right. Yeah, the engineers were full time. I mean, they were independent contractors, but they were putting in a lot of hours, and we paid them a lot to build out the tech. Again, we didn't have any type of experience building a company, a tech company, so we had to rely heavily on our engineers. They did an amazing job, just being there in the trenches with us, and we pretty much took on every other role. I mean, a lot of times in a startup, you're at least in the beginning stages. You're the chef, you're the cook, right. You're the bottle washer, dishwasher, you're everything, right? So that's how it was in the beginning.
Yeah. So was that what was the greatest challenge in those early days? Was it simply just the hours that you had to put into it?
I think it was. No, the hours actually weren't the challenge. I mean, the hours were actually fun. I mean, we were having fun building it. I think the challenge was really around, what do we not know, right? What are we missing? Are there things we should be doing that we don't know because we just aren't familiar with building a company, or are we doing things the right way, the wrong way? So I think in the beginning we were looking for like a blueprint, if you will, like a guide to how this is supposed to be done. And then when we found out that there really wasn't one, and each company is unique, and yes, there are some similarities, but there are some big differences, especially when you're dealing with legal tech. We just figured, let's just go full steam ahead. Let's learn what we can on the fly, and let's implement, and we'll continue to iterate as we go along.
Yeah, and even though 2015 isn't all that long ago, the legal tech industry was still felt a lot younger than just 5 years ago. It's developed quite a bit since then. So you were still in a lot of ways. I mean, there was sort of big legal tech, but the whole sort of startup scene in legal tech was still kind of just coming out then.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things about business is sometimes it's about timing, right? And so what we were able to see when we started building Court Buddy was that things were beginning to change across the country. There was a bigger push for access to justice. A lot of states were starting access to justice committees, subcommittees, and there was more energy and more focus on how do we narrow the gap between people that cannot have access or do not have access to the court systems or to justice versus those that do. And how do we get lawyers on board? So there was a bigger shift and a bigger push and more energy and more force behind access to justice than there was prior to 2015. And that's not to say that there weren't there weren't initiatives. There wasn't a push. There definitely was a push. It's just that it seemed to be more of it was almost like at a tipping point in 2015, and we sort of rode that wave into where we are now, and obviously there's a lot more initiatives now, but like you mentioned, I mean, it was probably still really early in this push back in 2015. Yeah.
So you mentioned the Startup Alley, the tech show competition. That was actually held in early 2017, and you had applied in 2016, went through the whole competition. And where were you at that point? I mean, at what point did you start to feel? I was actually I actually have some of the original materials. I have the PowerPoint you gave that year stored away on a Google Drive somewhere, and some of the other materials. But where were you by say late 2016, early 2017? Where were you in kind of gaining traction, gaining momentum for the company?
Yeah, we had that's a great question. I mean, we had successfully onboarded quite a few lawyers, and um, lawyers are pretty tough customers. I mean, you have to convince them that this is something that's going to be beneficial to them, that's going to add value, and that's really with any customer. But with lawyers, we're trained to be risk averse. We're trained to spot issues, and so
Right.
it's a little bit tougher to get lawyers or to convince lawyers to use a platform like CourtBuddy. And so once they understood how they could use this as a marketing tool, they could use this as a way to supplement their current income. They could, if they were, for example, a part-time lawyer or semi-retired or semi-retired lawyer, they could use CourtBuddy to still make some money. And for the on the other side, for consumers, I mean, there's always been demand. I mean, the numbers bear it out. I mean, even outside of CourtBuddy, I mean, you're talking about 80 to 90%, and it fluctuates depending on the jurisdiction. But these are 80 to 90% of individuals that are self-represented, or that may have hired a lawyer, but they don't have a lawyer currently, and so the demand was always there. It was really just getting the lawyers on board. But we started, I mean, the platform was really taking off at that point. I mean, we had also picked up a couple of awards. I think right before the ABA Tech Show in Startup Alley, where you and I were involved in that inaugural Startup Alley, I think we had just picked up the American Bar Association's Brown Select Award for Legal Access. We had already won the Miami Herald's Business Plan Challenge, where we took on essentially other companies, other startups, and we beat them out in a business plan challenge. And so we were already on a roll. We already had revenue at that point, and the revenue was still growing, and the numbers were just really growing, and so we were at a pretty good spot there, and things just continued to roll even through Startup Alley and after Startup Alley.
Right. And then after Startup Alley, I guess later that year, you guys raised $1 million in a seed round.
Correct.
Which was written up at the time, I guess, in the Miami Herald for the fact that by virtue of that, your wife became the 14th ever, I guess, African American woman to raise $1 million. Is that right?
Yes, and there's a lot to that raise. I mean, sometimes if you read a publication like TechCrunch or another publication that focuses a lot on, or like Forbes or the Wall Street Journal, there's a lot of focus on how much a company has raised.
Right.
But there should be a focus on the process, because I mean, we spoke to 200 investors. We ended up, for that $1 million seed round, we ended up getting 8 or 9 to say yes, they want to invest. But that just means that over 190 investors said no, right? And so it's a process. Fundraising is a process, but at the end of the day, the result was Christina, my wife, being the 14th African American woman to raise over $1 million in tech, and that was in 2017. Even before we raised that $1 million round, we went through an accelerator called Find Your Startups, and Find Your Startups invested $150,000 into CourtBuddy, and that was sort of like the springboard for us from an investment standpoint, because before that we had bootstrapped, we had used revenue to continue to grow the company. And Find Your Startups gave us, they were the first outside investor to invest in CourtBuddy, and then we raised that $1 million round about 3 months later. So this is again 2017.
Yeah. Well, you talk about the process, and I've certainly heard other entrepreneurs talk about that. But you're right; it's not talked about sort of in the media as much, and sometimes it makes it sound easy. Was it? Do you think that by virtue of being a Black entrepreneur in legal tech, it posed any particular additional challenges than you might have faced, as a white entrepreneur?
I do. Sadly, I do. And the reason why I say that is because we created this list. We call it the VC Follies list. And what's in that list is the things that we heard from VCs. VCs means venture capital for your listeners, venture capitalists. And so we would hear things like, "Oh, okay, you're trying to raise, you have $200,000 left in your $1 million round." And so they'd say, "Well, we only write checks that are $1 million or more." But 2 months later, or 2 months earlier than that, they were saying, "Yes, if you can get to 800K in your round, we'll invest 200K." Right. So the point is, there were these. It's almost like moving the goalposts, right?
Yeah.
We have. I mean, there's so many stories. We have another story where we were in the middle of pitching an investor, and he just got up and washed his hands, and you want to talk about rude. We found out that he told his partner, who was also in attendance, that he couldn't believe that he was shaking hands with a Black person. Right. So he got up and washed his hands because he didn't want to, I guess he wanted to cleanse himself, if you will,
he did this visibly in front. I mean, in a way, in front of us. It
was right in front of us. And we had to maintain our composure and keep pitching. And so there are a lot of, so to answer your question, yes, it was more of a challenge. But if you look at the makeup of like San Francisco and Silicon Valley, it's more of a challenge because there is like they call it pattern matching, right? So they're looking for a certain type of entrepreneur to invest in. And if you don't fit that mold, if you don't check those boxes, then you're going to have an uphill battle. And I'm not sure if it's limited to a Black founder. I mean, it could be, we say Black and brown founder, so it could be someone of Hispanic descent. Yeah. It can be, so it runs the gamut, but it is certainly a challenge, and we were able to fortunately overcome them. And a lot of it is just, look, you just focus on the business, you focus on what you can control. You can't control other people's behavior, but you can control your own behavior. You can control how you grow your company. And so that's what we focused on.
Yeah. Well, there isn't a lot. I was actually writing something recently about this, and there isn't much in the way of research or data on sort of diversity in the legal tech field. There was a study done a couple of years ago. I don't know if you know Kristen Sande, who's a founder of Paladin. I think actually Paladin might have been one of the in that year or two. But she did some research into this, and this was 2 years ago now, so it's a little bit out of date. But she looked at the founders of legal tech companies and found out of 478 founders that she studied, only 26 were Black or Hispanic. And that. Even when they're sort of accounting for, I don't know, Asian, Indian, Middle East founders, the total number of founders of color of any kind in legal tech was like 26.5%.
Right.
So that's a dismal statistic, and maybe we can talk later if you have any thoughts about how do we improve that. But in terms of your own experience, I mean, you kind of, despite the VC follies as you described, I mean, you were able to go on and raise a further round of $6 million in 2018, I think it was. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, going back really quick to you mentioned Kristen, Sande, and Felicity. Yeah. That team at Paladin, they've done an amazing job. Yeah. I think the last thing I read, they secured a partnership with Clio, and they're doing some things in the pro bono space. And so they've done an amazing job. They're a really good example of why diversity is so important. Charlie over at Rocket Lawyer is another example. What he's been able to do with his company. And so there are some examples, but like you said, those statistics are still dismal. And everything that, if there's anything that we could do, and we call them allies, right, for us to collectively make sure that those stats change for the better. We're all about that. And but yeah, I just wanted to point out that, Paladin, the team at Paladin and Rocket Lawyer, Charlie, those are some pretty good examples of how the industry has approached diversity and how they've been able to succeed. Right. Now, with respect to the Series A round, the $6 million Series A, we had to, our approach is a little different. Each round is, it takes a different approach because your company's at a different stage, right? For our Series A, we had racked up a couple of awards. Our numbers were getting better. We were in a position, the reason why we even decided to raise this round is because we wanted to essentially pour jet fuel into this engine that was roaring. And so one way to do that is to go out and raise another round. And so that's what we were able to do. This round was a little interesting because as you start moving further and further into from early stage to growth stage, the due diligence looks different. And what I mean by that is now they want to see, concrete numbers. They want to make sure that the engine is actually roaring. There was also legal due diligence. And what I mean by that is we actually had to show that, Court Buddy was ethical, had to check all the ethical boxes. We, of course, even in the onset of building Court Buddy, we made sure that we didn't run afoul of any ethics rules or any court opinions or rulings. And so that was something that we focused heavily on. And that was because the company was founded by lawyers. And so, but when we got into the Series A, it was all right. There's so much money at stake. We have to make sure that we're checking all these boxes. And so that was a little bit more of a difficult process. We signed a term sheet. I think this was in September, and we didn't close the round until November, and that was just because of all the diligence that had to take place to make sure that Court Buddy was really growing and it could still be successful with VC money. Yeah.
Did you experience any of the kind of racist kinds of issues that you encountered that first time around?
It was a little bit easier the second time around because we already had investors. And so what you find, and I don't know if this is just, I think this is, regardless of race or gender, but I think when you've already raised a round, it's a signal to the market that you've de-risked somewhat. You've somewhat de-risked the company, right? And you have investors that have said, look, they've checked the boxes. We've done our diligence, and we think that this is a great company. And so by the time we got to the Series A round, it was still a process. It was still a pretty long process. But we were able to make the round competitive because we had other investors that weren't current investors. They were new investors that wanted in, and so we just had to take those meetings. We had to get them over the finish line. And so in the end, we had several term sheets, and we ended up choosing one of the investors to lead the round. We had, I think, all of our investors at the seed round ended up investing. It's called follow on. That's the technical term, follow on. They ended up following on for the Series A. But it was a little bit easier to raise the round, but it still wasn't easy. It was still really difficult. And we ended up raising from some really great investors: First Round Capital, Gingerbread Capital, Capor Capital, Lightspeed, Find Your Startups. So some really, really great, and even some angels like Monique Woodard. She's at Cake Ventures now, her own VC firm, but she also was really a great investor. Even from the beginning, she was one of our first investors. So we ended up, doing pretty well in terms of closing that Series A.
We'll get back to my interview in just a moment, but first, let's take a break to hear from the sponsors who generously support LawNext. Now, let's get back to this week's interview. At some point over the years, and I'm not sure when this happened, you picked up and left Florida for the West Coast. Was that to be closer to the investment world or the tech world, or just a lifestyle choice?
Well, I wish it was a lifestyle choice. It's hard to leave Miami and
Yeah,
go to San Francisco and say it's a lifestyle choice.
Yeah, well, that's true. They're both
Yeah.
great cities, but
Both great cities, exactly. Yeah, so we launched Court Buddy in 2015 in Miami or in South Florida. And in 2017, when we took outside capital from Founder Startups, part of their requirement at the time, I think it may have changed now with COVID-19 and the move to remote work and virtual meetings. But at the time in 2017, once we were accepted, there was a requirement that all founders, at least the founders, in most cases, the founders in there, these are small teams now. So the founders and maybe the engineers and marketing people had to move to San Francisco. And so Founder Startups at the time had an office in Mountain View, California, as well as San Francisco. And so depending on which batch you were selected to be a part of, you were either going to be in Mountain View or San Francisco. So we were in batch 20 and we were in San Francisco. But we ended up moving. That's another story. That whole process. But we ended up moving our entire lives from Miami to San Francisco, and this was in 2017. So yeah, to answer your question. Yes, the investors are what brought us to San Francisco, and they actually, it's part of their, they want to be close to the company. So it's part of their I guess their rationale for investing is we want to be close. We want to be able to be as helpful as possible, and we want you to experience, the innovation and the energy of the startup capital of the world. So that's part of the reason why they wanted us to move there. And it's not just Court Buddy. I mean, that's how if you go through an accelerator like Finder Startups, at least at that time, you would have to move to the Bay Area.
Yeah. Last year, Black Enterprise recognized you and Christina as their Tech Entrepreneurs of the Year.
Yes,
it's quite an honor.
Yes,
but then the year ends with the two of you, I guess, deciding to step away from the company. What got you to that point?
So yeah, I mean, I tell people that Court Buddy was more of an accidental business. And I mean, what a great accidental business, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
You're able to raise a couple $1 million and do really well and do good for lots of people across the country.
Yeah, I think I'm learning that a lot of businesses are accidental businesses from a lot of the people I talk to. They certainly didn't they didn't set out to start them. They kind of happened out of experiences or observations or whatever else.
Exactly, a desire to start a problem. I mean, I'm sorry,
right.
solve a problem and
exactly.
create value. So we ended up we won Tech Entrepreneurs of the Year from Black Enterprise. Incredible honor. They did a really big ceremony for all the winners, and we were on stage. And what was great is our parents were there. Our daughter was able to see us, and so it was great for that to happen. Very very honored and humbled by that award. But yeah, as we started getting to the end of the year, we started really thinking about our future. We started thinking about what else can we do to add value to the world. None of us are going to be on this earth forever. We all have an expiration date, and so we started becoming more forward thinking, and that added with the fact that Court Buddy could now, without the founders being involved in the day to day, could actually survive and thrive on its own. And so we have board meetings like any other company that's raised money. I mean, you have, or public companies, you have board meetings, and we had our quarterly board meeting in November. And so it came up during the board meeting, and we started talking about the future. And at the end, we decided to exit. We decided that in Christina's case, she wanted to write a children's book, which she was able to do. And the book is called, shameless plug here, but My Forever Guardian, available on Amazon.
Forever Guardian.
Yeah, My Forever Guardian. Yes, and she also wanted to start a video sharing platform because she is passionate about children's therapy. She was unfortunately lost her father at the age of 7, and so she wanted to find a way to help out other kids that may be going through a grieving process. And so she wanted to do something else. I wanted to get involved in going back to my roots in music and entertainment. I wanted to create a platform that could, connect the industry or industry executives with talent across the world. And so we just had other things we wanted to focus on, and and we ended up stepping down. And Court Buddy's still going strong, and we're still working on our projects, and we've raised some more money for our current ventures. And after we took a step down, we took a month and we went to Thailand, and we started on a spiritual journey or a spiritual revival, and yeah, it's been a blessing to be able to do that, and to see Court Buddy still doing well under the new leadership.
That sounds great. Do you have any involvement with Court Buddy anymore?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Do you have any further involvement with Court Buddy? Are you involved in any way?
No, I'm not involved in Court Buddy anymore. Neither is Christina. We're very confident in the leadership team over there. A lot of the leaders at Court Buddy we hired and we've worked with while we were there. So it was easy to make that transition. But no, we're not involved in the day-to-day or management or operations of Court Buddy anymore.
Yeah, and so now you're in the midst of beginning to build another startup.
Correct. Yeah, it's called Owners. OWNORS. It's not in the legal tech space. There is one component on the platform that involves contract automation, but it's not in the legal tech space. But yeah, I mean, it's another journey. I really enjoy being an entrepreneur. I do think that this is my calling now. I think same with my wife. But yeah, it's another journey. We raised around. Back in April, in spite of COVID-19, and the reshifting of the economy around the world. But yeah, it's another journey. Happy to be on this journey, and ready to continue to move forward and see what happens with Owners.
So now you officially get to call yourself a serial entrepreneur, as some other people in Silicon Valley do. But what?
Correct. Yes.
Given the experience you've had, I mean, what have you learned about starting a startup that you didn't know, couldn't have anticipated 5 years ago? What advice would you give to others who are just kind of starting into this area?
Well, that's a great question. I think some of the lessons that I've learned is, business is all about learning. It's experimentation. It's learning. You don't have to have a blueprint to start or to figure things out. What we've found is there are a lot of people that for just fear, they don't even get started. And I think I read somewhere that starting a business is similar to, and I'm sure most people haven't done this, but if you jump out of a plane, right? I mean, there's probably all these different things that are going through your mind. You have all this fear. And then, and I haven't personally jumped out of a plane either. I've done some crazy stuff, but I haven't done that. But what I've heard is that, as soon as you're so nervous, you're so fearful, and then all of a sudden you jump and you see this amazing world in front of you, and, you're slowly descending, but you're able to, your mind becomes so much clearer, right? And so I think that's similar to starting a business. It's, you're so fearful. I need to set aside time. What if I lose my job? I can't do this right now. I have kids. And then you do it and you're like, oh, wow, okay, I can figure this out. Let me do some research here. Let me do some research there. Let me hire this person. And things start coming together. And so I think one of the things I've learned is, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to take calculated risk. I think if you go down the VC investor route, I think it's really important to really carefully consider who you want on your board. And I think it's really important to choose your investors wisely. When you're raising money, investors are doing due diligence on you and they're doing due business. But I think you should also do the same. I think founders should also do the due diligence on the investors. And it's easier said than done, especially when you're maybe cash strapped or you need the money. But I think over time, if you're in a position where you can check those boxes with investors and say, no, this investor doesn't believe in this, or they don't follow this, or they don't ascribe to this, then you can make a decision about who you want on your cap table. I think making sure you surround yourself with board members and people that will actually fight for you, because all businesses have issues. And I think, I've found, unfortunately, that, there are some spineless people in this world. There are some people that that just don't have, I call them like fair weather friends, right? Like,
Yep.
depending on which way the wind blows, that's what direction they're going to go in. And so, I think it's really important to really take the time to, you know, carefully consider who's on your board, carefully do the research on investors. I think it's important to, if you have that itch to start a company, make sure you do your research, make sure you understand the market opportunity, but take that risk. I think at the end of the day, it's really difficult to submit a resume and go and find a job and apply to different companies to work for. That takes a lot of work, takes a lot of time. So you might as well take that same energy and apply it to starting a business that, over time can be less risky and can, make you wealthy
Yeah.
if you do it right. So
Let me just come back to that diversity question. Do you have
Sure.
any thoughts on how the legal tech industry, as opposed to the broader Silicon Valley or whatever tech industry, how we can do a better job of increasing diversity within this industry? How we can bring more people of color into the industry, as not just as founders, but as, I don't know, as engineers, as business staff, as whatever else.
yeah, I do have some thoughts. I think it actually starts at the school level. In law school, I remember, of course, there are the core courses towards, contracts, constitutional law. But as you get into your second and third year, you have a chance to take other courses. And there was a course I took that was kind of buried deeper in the curriculum, but it was called Law Practice Management, and it was all about how to start a law firm. As a matter of fact, the book for that class was called How to Start a Law Practice, How to Start and Build a Law Practice. And so I think, and
Jay
that class only
Floomberg
had.
book?
Yes, Jay Floomberg, exactly. Yeah, I think he has like 9 or 10 editions now.
Yeah.
I think he's So,
I read that
yeah,
book when I started my law office way back when. So.
exactly. And so there were, just by comparison, in evidence towards classes like that, there were 100 students at my school. I went to University of Florida for law school, and in that class, law practice management, there were maybe 20. Right. So I think the shift starts with the curriculum at law school. I think giving students a variety of different courses, especially when it comes to tech, when it comes to legal tech, giving them courses or offering courses that can get them prepared for a career in legal tech, and even if they're not going that route, at least they're exposed. At least they get the exposure to things outside of the traditional graduate from law school, go to a law firm, practice law, right? And so I think that it starts there. And I think that applies not just to from a diversity standpoint, but I think it applies across the board. That's just not with save there are some exceptions here and there from law schools that are offering legal tech courses, access to justice courses, but outside of that, I think it's still lacking in law school. And I think post law school, I think like your podcast, for example, you bring a lot of attention to your podcast is called LawNext, right? So it's like the next, what's happening, what's going to happen for future generations, what's going to happen 10 years from now, 5 years from now, 20 30 years from now, right? So it's all about the future. And I think the more that people understand, look, you don't have to go the traditional route. Like, you can have a legal tech company that hires lawyers of any color, or you can start your own company and you can hire lawyers of any color. You can hire other professionals. You can be a legal professional. You can be a paralegal. You can do other things that can be a part of legal tech, right? You don't have to necessarily go the traditional route. So I think more of a focus on alternatives. I think would be helpful. And I think highlighting companies like CourtBuddy, highlighting companies like Paladin, Rocket Lawyer, because a lot of times it's just visibility too, right? I mean,
Yep.
think if you think back, pre 2008. I mean, we elected American elected, President Obama. But pre 2008, were there many images of an African American that could be president, right? I mean, maybe on TV, but you need that visibility. And hopefully we get to elect in the next few years a woman as president, and that's going to be visibility, right? That's going to increase diversity. So I think things like that, the visibility, showing that that we have leaders in legal tech that are Black and brown, for others to see, like, this is possible, right? This is not a pipe dream. There's hope, there's possibility here. I think those are some of the keys.
Yeah, those are great thoughts. I'm thinking back to your horrifying story about that meeting with those investors early on. Do you think that some of the responsibility here lies on the investment community? I mean, now there's a lot more money pouring into legal tech. Should investors be more considerate of looking for diversity and where they're putting their money?
Absolutely. I think so. The way, at least when it comes to venture capital, right? You have general partners or fund managers, and then you have the limited partners or LPs that invest in these funds. And so the LPs are generally, endowment funds that can come from, any university, for example. So let's use like Harvard, for example, or Stanford, or pretty much any university. They can have an endowment, and these endowments invest in venture capital funds. You also have family offices, and you have in some cases high net worth individuals. And the point is, it starts with LPs. Like the LPs, because they're the ones that are writing the checks, they can say, for example, especially when it comes to endowment funds, right, or pension funds, they can say, we need to allocate a certain amount to diverse founders, invested in diverse founders. They can have a diversity initiative. And I think once the VCs get that type of pressure from their LPs, then they will have to change, right? If you look at sports, I'll use sports as an example. At one point, the NFL, the NBA, there just weren't any Black quarterbacks. There weren't any, there weren't any Blacks in general playing sports. And then things changed, right? Once the door opened, now look at that's mostly Black, right? The NFL, NBA, at least at the player level. And so I think that's what needs to happen in VC, because there are very talented founders out there, represented founders. And what they need is just exposure. They need access to capital. They need the exposure. And I have no doubt in my mind they can build multi-billion-dollar companies. And by doing so, wouldn't that benefit the VCs that are investing in them? Wouldn't that benefit the LPs that are invested in the VCs, right? So I think diversity serves everyone well, because at the end of the day, if the only race, quote unquote, that matters is green, and a lot of green is being made because of these investments, then everyone benefits, right? So I do think that that's one way to change the industry, and that's it seems like things are slowly getting better. But it's really, really slow. It's really, really slow. You need those successes. I mean, success leads to success, right? So I think that's what you need to change the industry. Yeah.
Well, congratulations to you and Christina for being one of those success stories, and it's been interesting to hear the story and to talk to you about it today. I really appreciate your taking the time to share this with us.
Thank you so much, Bob. Thank you for having me. And it's almost like the perfect bookend, right? We met a few years ago, and
met as you're getting started, and talk as you're getting out of it.
Right, exactly. Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. It's been fun to catch up, and best wishes to you and to Christina. Thanks again. We've been speaking with James Jones Jr., the co-founder of Court Buddy, and now on to new ventures. Thanks to all of you for listening today. Really appreciate it. Thanks, as always, to Populous Radio for producing and editing the show. That's going to do it for this week. This is Bob Ambrogi.